This simple overnight warmth rule governed winter survival long before central heating existed. For most of human history, winter was not an inconvenience. It was a seasonal threat that demanded discipline, planning, and restraint. Fuel was finite, daylight was short, and mistakes made after sunset often carried consequences by morning. Out of this reality emerged a simple overnight warmth rule that households across Europe and North America followed without question: trap heat early, reduce air movement completely, and let stored warmth carry you through the night. This was not folklore. It was a practice system that saved fuel, preserved health, and reduced winter deaths in an era when recovery options were limited. Now, the rule worked because it treated heat as something to be conserved rather than, just continuously generated. The rule began with sealing the living space before nightfall, making sure all that warmth stayed put. Homes were prepared for night hours before darkness fully set in. Interior doors were closed deliberately to reduce the total volume of air that needed to stay warm. Chimney dampers were adjusted once fires burned down to embers, just to prevent warm air from being pulled upward. Window shutters, heavy curtains, and layered coverings were closed tightly while indoor air was still warm, not after the house had cooled. This sequence mattered. Trapping warm air early allowed residual heat from masonry, stoves, and human activity to remain inside far longer than most modern occupants expect. The mistake many make today is sealing a space after it has already lost heat, which defeats the purpose entirely. In practical modern terms, this means reducing airflow before temperature drops accelerate, closing off unused rooms, sealing drafts with removable materials, and lowering ventilation overnight mimics what was once standard behavior. So, the principle here ain't just about insulation upgrades alone, but it's really about timing and control. Heat storage actually mattered more than just plain old heat production. Back in the day, older homes relied on mass instead of constant output. Brick hearths, stone floors, clay-lined stoves, and even those thick plaster walls would soak up heat during the busy hours, and then, they'd let it out nice and slow through the night. Once the fire was reduced, airflow was restricted, and the house entered what could be described as heat hold mode. Heating a space aggressively for a short period before sleep and then allowing stored warmth to carry through the night often uses less energy than maintaining steady output for 8 hours. Modern materials may not store heat as effectively as stone, but furniture, flooring, and even interior walls still absorb more heat than folks usually assume. The sleeping arrangement was designed as a heat system, not a comfort choice. Beds were positioned away from exterior walls and windows whenever possible. Multiple sleepers shared space not for social reasons, but, for thermal efficiency. Bed curtains, often dismissed as decorative today, actually served a critical function by reducing the volume of air surrounding the sleeper. Sleeping with doors closed, reducing room size, and layering breathable natural fibers still creates a microclimate that requires far less ambient heating. Even in modern homes, this approach can allow overnight thermostat reductions without discomfort. Fire management overnight reduced both risk and fuel loss. Fires were never left open. Coals were banked tightly with ash to slow combustion, preserving usable embers for morning relighting. This reduced the need for fresh fuel at dawn and, prevented chimney drafts from pulling heat out of the home all night. For modern users of wood stoves or fireplaces, the same principle applies. A controlled burn followed by proper damper management retains heat longer and reduces fuel consumption. Clothing was part of the overnight system, not an afterthought. Night garments were not thin or decorative. They were functional layers designed to maintain warmth without restricting circulation. Head coverings were common, as heat loss from the head was well understood through experience rather than theory. Illness prevention depended on thermal stability, not constant warmth. The overnight warmth rule was not complicated, but it required discipline. Heat was generated intentionally, stored deliberately, and protected aggressively. Nothing about it relied on excess. That is why it endured across generations and climates. Subscribe to Warfield Prepper Chronicles for more documented practices that shaped real-world survival long before modern systems existed. Share this with others who value practical history and keep these methods alive by understanding them properly rather than dismissing them as outdated.